Hey there, this is John McDavitt with the Breakthrough Creative, where we talk about the business of art and the art of business. My guest today is Jessi Levine, who is a creative director by way of creative writing. So she works in the marketing and advertising world, and she has recently put some wheels under her entrepreneurship by opening a mobile floral shop named Gary. So I'm really looking forward to sharing her story with you. So let's get right to it. Hey, Jessi.
Hey, thanks for having me. You
Thanks
wouldn't
for
mind me
being here.
that, but
What's that? I'm sorry. I already did it. I already spoke over
no,
you.
you're fine. So no, you're right. So yeah, I have an interesting background. I'll try to summarize it in an elevator pitch. So I've been in the industry for about 20 years. I got an interesting start. I started in journalism. I went to school for that. I love telling stories, telling people stories, kind of figuring out what makes people tick. But my dream was, I live in Kansas City and I wanted to do that in New York. I never made it to New York. So after a few years of, I ended up writing full-length features about industrial ovens for a baking trade magazine. My soul was, I was dying, like hated it. And so I realized that I had this strong need to be able to be creative in whatever it was I was doing. Because you can't really tell that creative of a story about an oven, 4,000 words. It was painful. So I crossed on over to advertising kind of as a fluke. I had a neighbor who was working at an agency in town, and we were on AOL chat. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And he thought I was funny. He's like, "You're funny. You can write short. You should apply for this job as a copywriter." And I didn't even know what a copywriter was then. So I was like, okay. So I show up to this agency. I'm dressed up. No one dresses up. So right away, that's a red flag. And I have no ad copy to show them. I just brought some headlines and poetry. I was 26 or something. They took a chance. So long story short, I spent years in and out of different agencies, all of the big ones in Kansas City. And then I was recruited to San Diego for a little bit and worked there. Came back and sort of had this light bulb moment of I wanted to make sure that whatever I was doing professionally was something that I could sleep well at night knowing that I was making a difference or adding some good to the world and not just selling another hamburger to, someone. Because I did do that. I worked on Sonic, Red Robin, Burger King. I had a lot of hamburgers that I've sold people. So I got back to Kansas City from San Diego and ended up working at Cerner for 3 years, which is a big healthcare IT company. I creative directed our internal creative department there. And that was definitely something that I felt good about. I felt good about the work I was doing there. We were really making healthcare seamless and easier for the patient, which is someone who's often forgotten in the healthcare experience, unfortunately. But then I sort of had this itch I wanted to scratch, is the best way to put this. I come from a long line of entrepreneurs. My father never worked for anyone but himself his entire life. He's still alive. I have to remind people of this because I talk about him like he's dead, but he's here. He was over here yesterday. And he was a florist. And so I just started about 2 years into my Cerner tenure. I started to think, what could I do for myself that's something within the realm of the creativity and the writing and all that I've done, but that it takes a whole different sort of skill set. And I also wanted to learn how to run a business. And so 3 years, almost to the day of my time at Cerner, I gave them 2 weeks notice and took a risk and started a floral studio named after my father. And I do it out of the house, and I have a vintage camper that's been converted into like a mobile pop-up, which has been fun. I mean, it's also been, I've learned a lot of lessons about having a vintage camper. So now I do that like probably 50% of my time, and then 50% of my time I'm still writing, creative directing, and consulting for a lot of freelance clients. So yeah.
Wow. Well, at least you kept it really simple. I mean, oh my goodness, and I mean that as a compliment. That's a path that only a very unique individual might go on, which is so cool, and it's so breakthrough creative. So let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
So let's go back to prior to your first copywriting job. How did you know as a youngster? I don't know if you were a child, you were a teenager, where you're at. You're like, I need to do something creative for a living.
Yeah. I think I kind of always knew, but I didn't know. I think that there was a point where I didn't know that you could write and make money writing. Like I understood that, I read a lot of books, and I was voraciously a consumer of poetry as a child. And I guess I understood that those people made money doing that, but I didn't understand the logistics because, I mean, I don't come from a long history of people making money to be creative necessarily in my family. Like my mom's a sociologist, and it's just sort of like that wasn't something we talked about. But I started writing really early. I remember my first story. It was horrible, but it was called Me and the Missing Key. So it rhymed and it was a story. But it was I do credit I went to a private all girls college preparatory high school. I had a really great AP English teacher who, to this day, I mean, Judy Bromberg, she encouraged me. I think she saw the talent I had when I was in high school, and is really kind of what made me realize not only am I good at this, and I don't ever want to brag. I want to remain humble, but I think that writing is a weird thing because everyone can do it, right? It comes easier to some people. And for whatever reason, I never had to really try. It just came out of me like a flow. You hear about flow, with artists, or it's just that term of like when you're going and you're being creative, it just comes, and there's like nothing that can stop it. And that's how it is with me in words, and ideas, and things like that. So it was really probably my junior year in high school that I realized, okay, this is what I need to do for a living. And then I learned, oh, well, the best journalism school in the nation currently is 2 hours away in Columbia, Missouri, which, they don't just let anyone into that. So that was a whole 1.5-year process of having to keep a 4.0. But then as soon as I got in, I was happy with C's. Well, I made it. But yeah.
So you had a desire and a drive to do something creative, particularly around words and storytelling, and you were fortunate, as I think many of us who have made it or are on a path toward making it to where we want to go. We've had some kind of a powerful mentor in our lives that has spoken into us and believed for us and in us. And that helped you on that part of your path. So you're in college, you're happy with your C's. What are you looking ahead to?
Well, I didn't really know. I mean, at the time, so I went through the journalism school, but then you could choose a sequence. So first, I was going to do broadcast. I don't know why. Well, I don't know. It seemed more glamorous, right? But we had this, at my freshman year, we had a news anchor come in. She told us, your first 5 years, you're going to spend all your salary on your wardrobe. And I was like, this isn't for me. So I changed right away. I was like, I don't care about that stuff. So I actually focused on magazine, because like long long form storytelling. And it's really what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, I landed in Kansas City because my family's here, but we don't have no one was paying a Kansas City writer at the time to write a piece for Esquire. So, that was my dream. But it's okay. When you're 18, you don't really know what you want. Could I have done it? Yes. Am I glad that I am in the Midwest? Yes. A lot of good has come from it. So.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So then you're out of school and you go and you get this job, right? They take this chance on you, and it was for an entry level copywriting position.
Yeah, so I did like 3 jobs I hated before I went and decided to try to do advertising. But yes, it was a copyright. It wasn't junior. It was just copywriter. But right away I was put on. I had a team of, I think, like 6 of us. We worked on Burger King was our main account. We had Xbox. We had a lot of Cadbury Schweppes business. Before long, I was, working and doing all the creative for the pitches, like winning business. Quickly, I understood what I was doing, but it was such a foreign world to me at first that I just remember. So at the time, it was for VML, and they're huge now, and they were big then. They weren't part of Y&R yet, and they were mostly digital. So we were the digital agency of record for a lot of these clients. So we had a big piece of Burger King, but the main decisions, like, we didn't come up with King, but we'd do all the other stuff. So I just remember sitting in this room for a brainstorm, which I wasn't used to having to throw ideas out, in front of a bunch of people. And, your first 25 ideas are usually terrible. And that was a big moment where I was like, okay, I have to put myself out there and my brain can be kind of weird. So I'm going to say some weird things, and it worked. When you find the right creative dynamic, you work and feed off of each other. But I remember then they were talking about a leaderboard, which I just had no idea what it was. I wasn't really familiar with online gaming or anything at the time. And this was 2006. And it's essentially, it is exactly what it sounds like. It's okay, who's playing this Burger King online game, and who's in the lead, and who's blah, blah, blah. But it's literally, I sat there for 2 hours trying to figure out, it was like decoding something. I want to give an idea, but I don't know what these terms are. Someone help me. I don't want to seem stupid. But I figured it out.
How did you figure it out?
Observing, and then I'd find someone that I could trust and be like,
Yeah.
Hey, what's that? I also learned a lot of, it was me and a group of 7 guys. We were all about the same age, and our creative director then has since become one of my closest friends. He and his wife. Once I no longer worked for him. It's kind of funny, but I learned a lot. I was the naive girl on the team. I can't even say the things they taught me about just terminology I'd never heard of that's inappropriate. So I had to learn all that stuff, but then also no, this is what this is what we're doing. This is what a creative brief is. Just things that I didn't go to college to learn. So I kind of came in blind, but it was good because it was humbling, but also I found something I really enjoyed.
Yeah. I think whenever we get into a new, I guess the business world, there's a culture that goes with whatever slice of the pie you're in. Like when I got into toy design, there was a culture there, and they don't teach that stuff in school. You have to go and you have to get in it, and then you kind of have to thrive and survive, or survive and thrive, I guess, in the midst of it. And you're it's almost a little bit like being back in high school again, I think, or middle school, where you're kind of, maybe if you don't have a crowd you're running with, keep your head down a little bit and you're trying to figure things out.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's this weird fine line of that too, because it's you want to respect the culture and not just walk in and act like you should fit in right away. But then there's a weird, everywhere I've worked, there's some sort of weird click you have to figure out. and it also depends on your role, right? So like once I got into more of a management leadership role, you realize, okay, well, these people I could have been friends with 2 jobs ago. I have to have this distance now because they report to me, and I have to be okay that they're not inviting me to their happy hour. So, you know, it's just this whole like shift. But yeah, culture, I realized quickly that the culture of any place that I wanted to spend the majority of my day at was the most important, even more important than the work I was doing.
Yeah.
'Cause without a culture that fits, I think, a creative person, they can't be creative. It's stifling. I have taken a few jobs that they're not even on my resume because they were so short, you know, where you take it, you don't really know what's good. Like, it sounds good on paper. You don't see the office space. Like, I don't know, like maybe they meet you for drinks for your interview or whatever. And you walk in on your first day. There's just something I've known twice. This is a mistake. Like, this is not a culture this is like a cube farm, you know, and then you stay as long as you feel like you should, but it's not. So I think that's part of what made me want to figure out a way to work for myself, because I can create my own culture, and still, while freelancing, I'm able to go and meet with people and work with people and be a part of their culture for a little bit, and then come back and like focus on my flowers and make some pretty things.
So tell me about that moment where you decided, okay, I can't work for somebody right now, like full time. I need to go it alone. Like, was it kind of instantaneous and you jumped for it, or was there a lot of planning? Was it a decade in? Like, what was your planning?
So I'm a planner. I am not impulsive. I wish I was more impulsive, but I know that I think it would help me and hurt me, but I planned for this. So I knew about a year and a half before I put my notice in at Cerner that I was going to do something. At the time, I had a really good friend. I still have the really good friend. Her husband, now ex, was a chef in town. And we had supper club that I organized. That we'd have about 6 of us every once a month. Another way I love to be creative is cooking. And so we'd make these like really amazing meals, and there's pressure because there's a chef in the supper club, but I somehow always impressed him with my food. So he at the time was, you know, working for himself. He had this little restaurant he was running, and I was talking to him about it, and you know, they just kept encouraging me. They're like, Jessi, if you have this itch, you need to scratch it. If you don't ever scratch it, you'll always wonder if you should have done it or not. Like, and he said to me, you know, a lot of people aren't wired to even explore this. So if this is something that's really heavy on your heart, you need to explore it. So I was like, okay. So I started looking into like what can help me figure out or get there while I'm still working. And not, you know, and of course I didn't want to spend any of my time while I was being paid by an employer to work on my, you know, I don't want to get fired. So I actually lived down the street from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and they had a entrepreneurship program that was you had to apply for. They take it's like half community members and half students. It was like a Thursday nights from like 6 to 8 and like one Saturday a month for a full year. Not for any sort of grade, but just for credit. And it kind of takes you through like what it takes to actually run a business. A lot of stuff I knew because of my father, and I just knew I have a lot of friends who run businesses. So like I work a lot with my friend Tim, who owns the gym I go to, and I help him with like business strategy and consulting. So I kind of knew all of it, but not enough. Like, of course I knew the marketing part. I had a brand done before I actually had any flowers. But so I enrolled in that, or I applied, and I got into that. And I was hell-bent on doing a sandwich shop with flowers, brick and mortar. And the more and more I sat in these classes and talked to other entrepreneurs in the city who were trying to do something, and most of them were like app developers or doing something where like there's literally no overhead, they could do it from their garage. And I started thinking, how can I make this leap without having to take a huge financial risk? Because it's already a huge financial risk to walk away from a salary, right?
Right.
And so I just shifted my plan from brick and mortar to mobile. And then I figured, I mean, I'm a really good cook, but I know nothing about running a restaurant. And thank goodness, because no one knew that 2020 was going to be the way 2020 has been. And I've been extremely thankful that I just, for some reason, with divine intervention or whatever you want, just did not do that. Because I was looking at, I had spaces in certain neighborhoods people wanted me to rent. I was talking to business owners and like building owners, and I just didn't feel right about it. So yeah, so I found the camper. I didn't know what I wanted my mobile vehicle to be. But I knew that I wanted to do pop-ups. Like I wanted to go to where the people were versus having a brick and mortar at that point. And I just happened to find the perfect thing just across the state line. This woman had it. She had her third child, didn't want to do it anymore, sold it to me for a reasonable price. I didn't know if it would get up my driveway. I live on a hill. So they were kind enough to drive it over to my house because I didn't have a trailer hitch yet. And I was like, if it fits in my driveway, I'll buy it from you because I'd already seen it. So they come over and like it's snowing and they're cold driveway. But it was kind of at that moment. So then that was December. I bought the thing. I'm like, all right, I have all winter to work on it and get this camper to where I need it to be for my business. And then I had some trips planned in the spring. So I was like, I'm going to keep my job through the spring so I can go on these vacations because I probably can't take one for 10 years after this. And then I just knew the timing just was right. It was actually almost, it's only been a little over a year. It was last May that I put in my notice and focused on this. I had a really good first year.
Congratulations and happy anniversary.
Thank you.
So that's awesome. I mean, what you're talking about in your planning is you didn't have a definitive answer to what you were going to do or how you were going to do it, but you were sleuthing ways. You were looking at brick and mortar, which, is just, renting a location.
Right.
And I mean, I'm with you. I've never been really big on overhead. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, as long as I have a piece of paper, an internet, and a pencil, I can communicate what I need to communicate. It helps for me to have the computer and Adobe Illustrator and all those things, but I couldn't imagine renting and doing a build out, or, I mean, especially in this day and age when you really don't have to.
No, I would have been in massive amount. The debt, like I just couldn't. I like to be. I'm not financially a risk taker.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that like I could still be calm and collected and run this business without a bunch of anxiety about expenses that I didn't need to be spending.
Well, and that's huge because I bet you that there are a lot of people who don't know you, but if they heard your story, they would say you are a risk taker. And, my personal belief on that is that I know that there are people who think I'm a risk taker, but they don't understand what I can do or how I see the world or what I'm comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we can do just like a little rabbit trail here, I think that something that happens with creatives is we have people who mean well in our lives, who love us, who just don't know how to advise us.
Mm-hmm.
And they're frightened for us because they can't see that they can jump the chasm that you're going to have to jump creatively in business. And so I think a lot of creatives get scared off by that and they don't fulfill their plans. What do you think of that?
I think you're right. Yeah, and not only that, not only do people who love us and want the best for us not necessarily understand what it is that we do. It's hard to wrap your head around for someone who hasn't been paid to be creative, that you can actually be paid to be creative all day. But I also think it's a high burnout industry and career because, I mean, I was just talking to a friend about this the other day. Like if I'd ever want to go back to an agency, they asked me. And you know, if it was the right opportunity and I will, yeah, sure, yes. But the thought of it, just the pressure of the constant, you know, when you're a creative person, you always have ideas. But then having to come up with the ones that are going to sell the thing and that the client's going to be okay with and that the CEO is going to like, it's just, it can burn a lot of people out. And I've seen a lot of burnout, especially the hours in the industry. If you're not working for yourself, I mean, it's 75 hours a week. So then you've got, I mean, I remember I was at an agency one time and like working, worked over Christmas break, worked over the weekends, worked over all of this. And my parents were like, what do you do? I lost 10 pounds. I couldn't sleep. And it's just, and so then I think that's when also those people that care are like, you're doing what you love, but you're killing yourself to do it, which again isn't worth it. I don't think for anybody. I mean, I think there's a time when you're 22 and that sounds fun, but then when you're 40, there's more to life than burnout. I don't know if this applies to this, but it might. I tend to look at, I had somebody tell me this one time, so this is not an original idea, but that there are two types of people in the world. There's scuba divers and snorkelers. And snorkelers, there's nothing wrong with either of them, right? Snorkelers are real happy at the top, just kind of observing what's going on, coming up for air every once in a while. There's a pretty fish. Scuba divers need to get to the bottom and go deeper. And I think that's kind of maybe the difference between someone who's pursuing a creative career versus, someone who just isn't driven in that way. Like I know so many people who, and sometimes I wish I was this way, can just go to their 9 to 5, do whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not something that they feel in their soul they have to do, but it's their paycheck and they leave work at work and they have a wonderful life. I've never been able to do that. I have to get really involved in it, passionate about it. I bring it home with me, and I think, but that's part of the drive. Maybe I think that's what drives really, if anyone to take a risk to be an entrepreneur, especially a creative entrepreneur, has to have that scuba diving quality.
So let me ask you, this is kind of an abstract question. What kind of fire burns inside of you?
That is abstract. A campfire. No,
because you're pretty chill, but I get the sense that you're really driven.
I have this might answer your question. It's not going to be specifically about fire, but
Yeah.
I have this mantra that I like to say and tell people who I'm trying to mentor. It just is a saying, don't stop until you haven't seen it before. And that's what drives me to try to reinvent either myself or what I'm doing as often as I need to keep it original, fresh, and I guess relevant. I think it's really easy to fall into a pattern of just being kind of stale or comfortable. And I don't know why I'm built this way, but I just cannot be comfortable. Like the second I'm comfortable, I feel like I'm not doing enough or doing something to like challenge myself to grow and to push myself out of a comfort zone to create something that's better than what I've done before. If that answers that fire question.
Yeah, I think you got a pretty good fire burning. Where did that come from?
I was a high achiever as a child. I don't know what, it's kind of interesting because I'm not sure if I got that from either of my parents. I mean, my dad was always coming up with new business ideas. So his flower business was like his third business. So he had other businesses he did before that. So I saw him invent and reinvent himself. And then, I think I was really lucky that my parents were able to enroll me in a school that really challenged me. So from really Montessori through my senior year in high school, I pushed myself academically. They didn't push me. I had this weird drive that I don't really understand where it came from, other than I think at the time it was a little bit of a perfectionism thing that I was probably misappropriating and making myself work harder than I needed to. But I would lock myself in my room before finals as a senior and study. I had a schedule. I remember I would like write it out hour by hour, how many times I was going, and I would study for 12 hours I would have been fine, but I just needed to do more. I would memorize. I remember our history teacher, junior year in high school, would tell us, which I don't know why they did this, but he would tell us ahead of time what the essay questions were going to be for the final. Finals were a big deal. Like we would all go in the gym and sit in these separate desks, and like it was a full day. And I still have nightmares about it. Like to this day, we dream about finals. And I would write the 4 essays before the day, and I would record myself reading them on like one of those old, like Walkmans or whatever, like the recorder thing. And then I'd put it in a Walkman and I'd listen to it for like a month until I'd memorized them all word for word. Then I just sit down for the final and just write it by heart. It's so weird. I mean, I think that's really neurotic of me, but that's just sort of where that all kind of started.
Well, it was your system, right? It worked for you.
Yeah. And you have to find systems that work for you. Even to this day.
Systems has been my focus for the last year and a half or two, because I'm a little bit more gregarious and kind of, hey, I'm going to go and this and that. And I can get stuff done and I can focus, but my character is to be a little bit more all over the place. And it's hard to get things done when you're like that. So yeah, know thyself, perhaps.
Right.
I mean, that's important.
And it's unique. I've been noticing, speaking of systems, I have so many friends who are either in a creative industry or in a similar one that recently, like in our 40s, we've been kind of sharing like, what do you do? Like, how do you do your calendar? And even yesterday, I have one friend who refuses to put anything on his phone calendar. He was showing me because I stopped by his office. Well, what I do is I write it down on a physical calendar. I'm like, you still have a physical calendar? He's like, yeah, I write it down. And then I'm like, well, what happens when you're at home and you don't remember it's a Sunday, like what time your meetings are on Monday morning? And he runs his own agency. And he's like, what I do then is I take a picture of my note on the calendar, and then I have a picture of it in my phone, and then I just look at that. I'm like, okay, whatever works. And if that's worked for him for 25 years, then like, we all have our things.
That's awesome.
It's really interesting what works for everybody.
Yeah, we all have our things. So we're gonna kind of get into your current business and how you're making things work. But I guess the way in, I think anyway, you can tell me if we're different, is tell me about your relationship with your dad and flowers and business. Because I mean, it's cool that, we just started talking a couple of weeks ago. A mutual friend introduced us for this podcast, and we started to follow each other on Instagram, and you've named the flower business after your dad. It's called Gary, right? And I see pictures of you with him, and I suspect that there's something special there.
Yeah, there is. So it's really funny. It's not funny. It's an interesting story. I didn't always have the best relationship with my dad growing up. And I have a brother and a sister, and really none of us did. my parents didn't, they were divorced, or they were married 30 years and then got divorced. So we lived in this house of like, they never really were happy. We kind of were each other's ally. I was the oldest kid, but like I always saw my dad working his butt off to support us so that we could go to private school, so that we could go on a, once a year vacation wherever. I mean, he worked hard. And I saw how happy he was when he decided to open his flower shop. So when I was in 7th grade, he went on a trip to California. We have I don't remember why he was there this time. We have family out there, but we hadn't met them yet. Long story. Anyway, he's in California. He sees that there's all these bucket shops, which now they're everywhere. But then it was just, flower stems in a bucket. He kind of recognized no one in Kansas City was doing that. And he previously had a plant business, so he kind of was into the whole wholesale things you can grow. And so he just kind of, I don't really even know how much planning went into this for him at all. I mean, literally, he is much more impulsive. Not anymore. Now he's basically Larry David. Like, if you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, you're watching my father. Like, people actually go up to him on the street and ask for his autograph. I'm not kidding.
They literally think he's Larry David.
Why would Larry David be hanging out in Kansas City?
Does he play it up?
Oh, yeah. He's definitely, I think, signed an autograph. But anyway.
Pretty good.
I hear the Curb Your Enthusiasm, like, anytime my dad's walking up. So anyway, he found this building. So we were living in the same neighborhood I live in now. So I kind of stay I root where I'm planted. And he found a building down the street from our childhood house that was like available. And he just was like, hey, I'm going to do it. He just like decided to open a flower shop. And then it became a flower and wine shop. And so he'd sell, not wine by the glass, but you could buy bottles of wine, flowers. And he just kept having these ideas of like how to make it work. He told me, he won't care that I say this because he's not doing this anymore. But so I got my first big order was the January before I officially started my business, because another friend of mine is a CEO of a company in town, and they had this open house, the new business opening, right, like for their new office. And he's like, can you do the flowers? And I was like, yeah, I'll figure it out. So I called my dad. I'm like, okay, I know what I'm doing, but I just need your help for this first one. And so he's like, okay, I'll help you. And, he comes over, and I have like $700 worth of flowers in here. Like, we had to make like 12 things. And I just needed a few simple tips, because I'd worked in his store and we all worked for him, like took deliveries or like wrapped up the flowers, but I didn't like care to learn a lot about it then. But aesthetically, I have an eye for putting it all together. Like, my designs, people really like for that reason. Like, I use white space as you would as a designer, but in my floral design.
They're beautiful.
Swedish design principle. Thank you. So my dad tells me when he's over, helping me with this, he goes, I didn't know how to arrange anything. He's like, I just had everyone come in and pick their own stems. He goes, but then I had this idea. Why don't I have someone who knows what they're doing come in, and I'll offer a class and people can pay for it, and I'll stand in the back and learn it too. So this is how he learned how to floral design, is he hired someone to teach customers, and then he stood in the back and learned. So he's always has some like loophole to where he's going to be successful. And so our relationship softened. We're all very close with him now. Actually, after my parents got divorced, I think they both became better people, because they're happy. But so we have a really close relationship now in my adulthood. And he has a soft heart. He's a big encourager. And, I'm the only one who didn't give him grandchildren. So it's kind of like my flower business is his, like, how's it going? Like, what are you doing today with the thing? So yeah, I knew right away, even before it was going to necessarily just be flowers, and I still thought it was going to be sandwiches and flowers, I was going to name it after him. So I named it Gary, which is his name. And I had him come over one day, and I was like, just write your name on this piece of paper. He's like, why? I was like, just do it. And so I took his actual handwriting, and I didn't design the logo. I'm not a designer, but I worked with a friend on it. I creative directed her on it. She did a great job. And then I just felt really strongly about, like I said, I did my branding before I actually knew what I was going to do, but this tagline of always wander home just sort of kept hitting me like that could be, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I thought people could maybe relate to it because at the time, this was before COVID and we all had to be home, but there was this, there's that movement for a long time of wanderlust, and people were like the millennials and people that are younger than you or I were like not happy unless they were traveling and, going and exploring everything. And I think that's all very important. But I was at a point in my life where I was realizing that sometimes to really save yourself or to find yourself again, you have to go back to your roots and where you started and just sort of start from there. And I wanted to, through my business, also sort of spread that message of like, it's okay to go back and to take a few steps back and to do something closer to where you began, because sometimes that's where you can find the inspiration to even keep, I struggled with depression for a while. Like this got me out of it. Like there's just things, I don't know, it's like reinventing yourself in favor of something you love versus something you don't.
Well, it sounds like you gave yourself permission to breathe a little bit creatively and to go on a new adventure with something that you had confidence would work.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that. So you decide you're going to pursue this floral business. You come to a point where brick and mortar isn't the way. You have this wintry connection to your pop-up camper, and that comes into your life. Where'd you go from there?
I went to Highway Patrol 12 times. I seriously did. I mean, so, with any planner, there's always the things you don't plan for. So before I bought the camper, I made like 12 phone calls to Missouri Department of Transportation just to make sure that when I spent more than several $1,000s on this thing, that I was going to be able to make it legal. Because for people who don't know, Kansas City, our state line is like this. Kansas is here, Missouri is here, we're one city. But there's different laws in each state that are completely, they make no sense unless, they make sense for like the farming part of Kansas, but not for the city part. So I was buying this camper from somebody on the Kansas side. And the Kansas side, you don't need to have a license plate on anything that weighs under 1,200 pounds. You don't have to have a VIN number, and all you need is a bill of sale. So I was like, I had the bill of sale. I called. I was like, is this going to be cool? Everyone's like, yeah, it'll be fine. Well, it wasn't fine. I put the camper on so I have a Subaru. I was like, okay, first thing I have to do is get a trailer hitch because I have to be able to pull it. So I got a trailer hitch put on, had no idea, I'd never pulled a trailer, plus this one kind of has a broken axle, so you can't back up with it, so you just have to go straight. It's kind of like life, right? Just go straight. So I pulled it to, there's only one place you can go, and it's, of course, highway and like 45 minutes away. So I'm driving this thing down can't see behind me, well, okay, what am I doing? I get there. Long story short, nothing of what they told me was true. I had to actually hire an attorney to help me prove that this was actually mine and not stolen. So it took a year to actually have them give me the title, to title this thing to me. And this is like the 7th time I took the camper. And finally, like they give me a VIN number, and the guy goes out because he knows me by then, and he's like putting it on the tongue of the camper. And I'm just so proud. I'm like taking pictures. I'm like, do you mind? Like, this was a $2,500 mistake. And like, now I'm like, this is it finally. And then I go like 2 weeks later to the DMV to get a license plate so I can really be legit. Well, they say, well, do you have your personal property receipt from last year? I'm like, well, I do, but I didn't claim this because it didn't even have a VIN number. So what was I going to pay property taxes on? You can't find it anywhere. They're like, sorry, you can't get a license plate until you guys. So it still doesn't, I don't have a license plate. Still, like, it's those things that like, the crazy planner in me is like, what the heck? But then like the business owner part that I've had to learn is like, well, I mean, it's legal. I could sell it if I needed to. If I get pulled over, I'll just show all the paperwork. So I take everything with me. Anyway, but so there's been hiccups. But my first actual event that I did a friends and family pop-up in my driveway because I just kind of wanted to get the system down.
Systems. Back to systems. Yeah.
And it's kind of it's an ordeal because you have to like set it up and open up the flaps for the windows, and like I wanted to figure out how I wanted to use it exactly because it's a really cute vehicle, and it's great. I mean, it's eye-catching. People notice it. People want to take pictures of it, which is not the reason I bought it, but like, we're living in an Instagram culture. So if you have something cool that's associated with your brand or your business, it doesn't hurt to get that publicity just because of that. So, I mean, from day one, when I set that thing up, I do well wherever I go. Now I haven't, unfortunately, during the spring, I didn't want to be the reason to create a crowd. I mean, I was really adamant about that. So I haven't done any pop-ups this year. But I have still been doing Floral out of my house. So I had a great Mother's Day. I had more people order from me on Mother's Day than I think. Last Mother's Day, it was my second pop-up. I sold out in an hour. I totally underestimated how many people would want to buy flowers from me, which was a great feeling. But this year, I just like sent an email out to people. And, I have a list now. I do all the business stuff. And it was obviously in the middle of the lockdown or quarantining. And I had people, I was willing to deliver. My father said he would do all my Mother's Day deliveries for me as long as I bought him a hamburger, right? So it's like a fair trade. So I'm like, that's fine. I'll sit at home for all the people who are going to come do a porch pickup. I only had like 3 people that wanted a delivery. Everyone wanted to get out of their house. I had people drive an hour to just come get their flowers. But it was the best day because I sat outside. It was kind of cool out. It wasn't too hot. And I got to, from a distance, see all these people that, like, I mean, some of them I don't know. I mean, I have customers who have just found me organically. But I've also been able to reconnect with a lot of people I haven't seen in a long time that are now, like, loyal to my business, which is just the great feeling of community, So I had someone stop by I used to work with 15 years ago at Barclay who I hadn't seen, or like, a childhood neighbor that I haven't seen in 30 years came and bought 3 things. So it's just great. Dave came over and bought something for his wife and his mother. It's just, that's like for me, like the joy that comes out of the floral business is getting to see the immediate gratification of someone being happy to get what you did. Because, in advertising or whatever, there's never an immediate sell. And then there's so much of it, like you Frankenstein it until it's no longer what your idea, but still it's fine because the client is happy and that's what matters. But with flowers, it's immediately, there's joy.
So I know you said you had people who kind of knew you and how do you market? I mean, you've got an email list. Are you just growing that? How many people are on your email list and how are you marketing?
I don't even know. I can't. Last year, my focus was trying to do a pop-up probably I did one every weekend or every other weekend until the weather got too bad, which too bad for flowers is really hot because I get heat exhaustion, or just too cold to where it's like it's basically if my customer service is being affected by the weather, I just don't do them because I learned that the hard way. It did one. But I partnered with other local businesses who had brick and mortars that would let me park my camper outside in one of their spots. So it actually was, Kansas City is a really great community for supporting new businesses, startups, women-owned businesses. It's been amazing. So specifically, I'd love to give them any credit they just like should get. My Mother's Day pop-up was at, I know this coffee shop entrepreneur in town, Zach, who started with one coffee shop and now has 3. And, you know, he let me park in a parking lot across from one of his most popular ones. And that's where, you know, then they would promote me on their social. So they already have a following. So they'd promote the event and then I'd promote the event. And so, I mean, that one, I literally had a line of people waiting before I got there. And I was just like, whoa, this could actually be, like, this was a good idea. Because I was so nervous getting there. And he even came out, he's like, how are you feeling? I'm like, I'm nervous. He's like, you'll be fine. It'll be great. And then 2 hours later, he's like, you already sold out? I'm like, yeah, I wish I had more inventory. I didn't know. And then another place that lets me basically go whenever I want, which is amazing. There's this bakery, McLean's Bakery, that's been in town for years, has changed ownership a little bit, but is now back to what it used to be. And I mean, they have lines out the door every Saturday morning. So I would just park around 7 a.m. and, usually sell out and by noon. And they would do the same thing. Like they would come out and take pictures of it because it's cute and like put it on their social media and then people would come. And so it's kind of this organic, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. They do not need my help, but I would also try to, like, if anyone just came to get flowers, I would send them in. Please go buy something from them. Please.
Well, it's good business too, because it's just, it's a cool add-on for where they're at. If you're there, it's attractive and it's a benefit. And sure, they like to help you, but you're benefiting them too. That's really cool.
And then my other partner in that in Kansas City is Underdog Wine Company. They did a Rose Palooza. They do like this event, like they do like once a summer. I think last summer they had decided to do 2 or 3. But for the second one, I was a part of that. So I was outside their store, and that was the day I learned I couldn't do heat advisory pop-ups. I actually, I was pretty rude to these girls. I mean, they were drunk from the wine tasting, and they couldn't decide who was going to buy the flowers it was someone's birthday. And I'd been out there, I was drenched. I mean, I have a picture. You remember about a year ago, there was that app where you can make yourself look old?
Yeah.
And everyone was doing it. I literally have a before and after picture of myself from that day. And after 4 hours in that heat, I looked like I'd used the face app. Like, I looked like I was 65 years old. And so that was I couldn't even drive, I couldn't even drive myself home. I literally think I probably should have gone to the hospital. So I learned, like, okay, I know I like to push myself, but I have a limit based on temperature. And if I'm going to be nice to people and be able to represent, because the thing that I've never had to do until I started working for myself is also be a face of a business. I mean, I've been the face of a creative team representing a business that has 40 other people representing it. But that's something that's taken some getting used to. And the comfort level of selling myself is also something that, as a creative person, I don't know if you agree, but it's a little bit of a struggle because I don't think we're built to be salespeople. We're just built to create. So I've had to learn how to market more strategically and how to think about that a little smarter, because if you're not selling anything, then you're not making money.
Right.
But that was probably the hardest part for me, was getting out from behind the curtain. And, it's me. It's just me doing this.
Well, and I suspect you're an introvert
Mm,
by nature. Are you kind of like an
well,
extroverted introvert?
yeah, yes. So I yeah, I'm the typical, I love to be in a room full of a lot of energy and talking to a lot of people, but I don't need it all the time. It doesn't exhaust me though. I'm not the textbook, like, then I get home and I need to take a nap.
Yeah.
But I'm not super, I'm introverted in the way that, like, if I'm comfortable with you or I know you, I can talk to you forever. But I don't like networking events.
Yeah.
I don't like to go up to strangers and be like, I'm Jessi. Tell me about yourself. Because I just can never think of the right thing to say.
Well, they say small talk is like infuriating for introverts.
Yeah, so maybe that.
Extroverts can kind of, I'm an extrovert and I I had to learn how to sell myself, but I like selling. I like, telling people how I can help them. But,
Yeah,
there's, I would agree to some degree that as a creative, it's hard because it's, it's, uh, it's hard to humble sell, you
hmm
know? I mean, and I think where I've kind of gotten to, and I really like that you said that you were good at what you do, and you said it doesn't sound humble. I think that's what you said, but
yeah,
I'll say to somebody, hey, I'm I'm saying this because it's true, and you can ask other people, but humbly, I'm really good at what I do, and I want to help you,
right,
and I kind of make it about them, which is what you should do because you're serving, right?
right.
um, I don't know that I understood that as much early on. That was a harder one because I was just good at what I did. I mean, at least at drawing, if I didn't know, exactly what they needed, I could get there, and I felt like a superhero coming in at times because I had this special power. But people, it's interesting, but if it doesn't help them, they don't really care if you can juggle 12 balls and
Right.
do it on a unicycle if you're not benefiting them. Got to be
Yeah.
there to help.
Well, right. And nobody wants to pay you if they're not going to get a return on their investment. So
Right.
it's important to be able to identify and tell them what that's going to be, and that they can trust you. But yeah, that's a hard thing, especially I have such a good network of people that, as far as like at least freelance projects or creative consulting jobs, I haven't had to sell myself as much because people just refer me or know me and call me and say, can you come in and do this?
Yeah.
But with the flowers, that was a whole new thing of like, there's a lot of competition out there. And what is making this different, which is part of why the camper experience initially was like, you're not just buying flowers for me, you're having an experience that you'll remember. I mean, little kids love to come into this. They'll come in and pretend they're selling things out of it, and it's just been really cool to watch that aspect of it. And it's like you could go to a florist and like pick something out of their cooler, or you can like come into the camper and pick something out of a cool vintage camper and a vintage vase, and I'll tell you my story or we'll talk. I've made a lot of friends through it. I like telling people the story about why it's called Gary. Normally my dad's right there, so I just say, here he is.
And they're like, wait, is he behind Larry David?
I know.
So how did you transition? Because like you're talking about with your creative directing and writing, the overhead isn't really there. How did you make that switch with you've got to have enough flowers, you've got to have enough material. I mean, that's a tough thing to balance. You got to have a place to store it. You got to keep it refrigerated. Like and again, your dad had the business. How did you make the shift?
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised that actually the lack of overhead you need to do flowers out of your house. So, not to give away all the secrets, but I mean, I work with a few wholesalers in town, the same ones my dad worked with. So it's funny, I go in there, they call me Little Gary, like it's the same people. hey, little Gary, how you doing? I'm like, I'm okay. Doing okay. Yeah, I'm like, he's great. And they remember me because I used to go in there with him when I was 6 and like, on like, the days that like you didn't have to go to school for some reason, like your
Yeah.
parents had what to do with you. Um, so I don't, unless I have an event coming up. So if I'm doing a pop-up, or recently I've been taking pre-orders for everything. I don't go buy any perishable goods, so no flowers, unless I know I'm going to sell them. So, and during COVID, actually, it was a little harder because not all the wholesalers were able to stay open, except for the ones who had contracts with grocery stores. So they legally had to. So like my vase place wasn't there, so I had to like find a different vase place. Like wholesaler I like, you couldn't go into the cooler for a little bit to choose anything. But I think for me, it was about keeping it all pretty even. I luckily didn't have to go into any debt to start this business. And I haven't gone into any. So it's not like I'm making a ton of money, but for the first year, not having to owe anything is nice. And the way that transition was just sort of like, well, I've always had some sort of freelancing client or business, even when I've been employed full time, as long as there was an issue like non-compete. So I've always been able to write off a lot of stuff, like you would, like part of the house, my internet. So I already knew all that. I have a really good accountant who was very patient, like has the patience of Job. I was trying to keep all my records at first, just like on a spreadsheet, and I'm horrible with spreadsheets, so it wasn't even right. And I remember I just printed everything out. I went to his office. I had like 4 folders, and I was just like, please help me get organized. So he set me up on QuickBooks because I couldn't figure that out, and that's been a lifesaver. So there's that. I have him making sure that like I'm paying my quarterly taxes and I'm doing this or that, like the stuff that you don't have to think about when you're not doing that. And then as far as like the campers, I have a place in my driveway where it stays. So that's where that goes. I bought like supplies and all of that, and I just store them. It's funny. I never was into crafts. Like I'm not a crafter, but I've realized that I kind of have a crafting career now. So like I essentially have a craft room where I just have all my floral supplies. And then in winter and fall, I make a lot of wreaths. I sell a lot of wreaths. And so I have a room where I have all that stuff. And luckily I have a house I live in by myself with plenty of space to do some of that, which is why I haven't had to look for extra storage. And I have a big 2-car garage that I can put stuff in. You actually don't have to refrigerate flowers if you use them right away. So I've gotten around that.
So you're kind of just in time. It comes and you're ready to roll.
Well, yeah, and if you take care of flowers right, and if you buy the right ones, so there is an art to it. Like you have to know, like you have to look at the stems, right? And if the stems look a certain way, don't buy them. Some of them I learned the hard way, like certain fillers, which I don't like to use very often, but can get really moldy fast or mildewy. And when I buy from wholesalers, some of the flowers haven't been in water for a week. They've been on a refrigerated truck. So the first thing you have to do is hydrate them. So it's a process. You get them home, hydrate them all. I mean, then they're just in buckets in my kitchen. Like they would have been in my dad's shop. He never refrigerated anything. And people say my arrangements last up to 2 weeks. So it's just proper care. I don't know. It's not like, it's like the dog whisperer. You have to like flower whisper.
Well, the devil's in the details, right? So if you know what you know how to do it well, that's awesome. Because if you had your arrangements and they lasted 3 days, people probably aren't going to be thrilled, or they'll kind of look at you a little funny. But you're giving quality. So you've got materials, you got time spent, skill spent, and then your actual artistic part of this process. How do you figure out your pricing?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So I kind of have figured that out the way my dad would. I feel, I obviously did some competitive analysis because who wouldn't? And I don't want to overprice myself so that I'm pricing out of the market. People know that I don't have the overhead of paying rent, so I don't think they expect to pay as much for an arrangement from me as they would from like the florist down the street who's got a $2,000 mortgage on their property. So I tried to, at first I decided I'm just going to do free delivery. Like that was going to be my thing, free delivery. My dad said, you're going to regret that. I was like, no, it'll be fine. It'll be great. Like, then I had to spend a whole day in the car doing free deliveries all over the city. And I was like, this is the worst decision I've ever made. So free delivery went out the window.
We learn from pain.
Well, and my friend who's a business owner that owns the gym that I talked about, he said, Jessi, you got to figure out what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy. And the parts that you don't enjoy, you can pay someone else to do. And I was like, that's right. You're right. I can. Theoretically, I could pay someone else to do that. So I will deliver for free within a certain vicinity. And then I add a delivery fee. I mean, if I've got to drive 35 minutes, everyone has that. My dad was right. You're crazy to not do that. Every florist has a delivery fee. So I have a delivery fee. As far as pricing, I just kind of, at first it's like, what do people think is fair? Like what is selling? So I did a couple experimental pop-ups where I do like a standard arrangement, either in not the cheesy mason jars, but there's these really cool mason jars you can get now. And I'll have like a mason jar arrangement at a pop-up or a hand-tied bouquet. And I was just kind of feeling out what people would spend, which is kind of a weird way to do it. But at first I was like, okay, they're $35 for this. And then I tried like $45. And like now sometimes, depending on how many flowers are there, people will pay $55. So it's sort of like, what are people paying for this right now anyway? And something I've noticed as a trend since March is that people are paying more for little luxuries because they want the little luxury than they were before. Because also people who haven't lost their jobs have money to spend. It's almost like in the 80s. My dad was telling me in the 80s, everyone had all this money to spend. So they'd buy tropical plants for their office like crazy because they didn't know what to do. Everyone just had this. It was a great time to be alive, apparently. I was alive, but I was 3 years old. So, but now it's like people who have just been staying home, haven't been going anywhere, haven't been spending money other than, there's not a lot to do right now. They'll spend $55 on a flower arrangement to make someone smile. And I haven't inflated my prices. It's like people don't even question it now. But what I like to do, I have standard pricing, but I just like to ask someone like, what do you want to spend? If someone calls me, like last week I did something for someone's last day at their job, and I just asked them, like, what's your budget? And if they tell me their budget, I'll make sure it's worth it. So I work within any budget, really.
That's awesome. So what's next for you? What's up?
Well, I am hoping that summer doesn't last too long and it will cool off enough for me to do some pop-ups in the fall. I also am really trying to ramp up my creative consulting and just freelance writing business. Because what I didn't realize when I went to focus 100% on flowers was how much I would miss writing and storytelling and advertising and branding and all of that. So I failed to say this earlier. So I quickly realized I had to do both. So I can't just do 100% flowers because I'm missing this part of my brain that is writing and branding and storytelling. So just really trying to do both. And I think, if anything, to me, when I was viewing my flower business, Gary, I almost looked at it as just another creative project, right? Because I was like, well, I have this idea. It's a creative idea. I'm going to brand it. I'm going to market it. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to make it. And then I told myself, because the perfectionist in me, even if it doesn't work, I can put it in my portfolio as something I did, which is true, right? Like, I came up with this by myself. Nobody helped me, and I could do this for someone else. So I just see, like, I don't know exactly where this is going to lead me, to answer your question, because I think everything has been sort of organic in the way it's happened, that I'm just like, if somebody wants to hire me to help them start a small business, I would love to do that. I mean, I think there's a whole other side of the creative part of me that could really help consult on another type of Gary, that would really marry the two, my two loves together, and still allow me to do both.
That's awesome. I mean, what you're saying is really at the heart of creativity and entrepreneurship. I see that clearly in you and your journey. So cool. And I hear you wanting to help and to serve as well, which is really important to making a living. So as we wrap up, what advice would you have that you think would really benefit the creative entrepreneur out there?
Yeah, I would just, I guess, to summarize, if if you have that burning somewhere inside of you, fire or whatever we want to call it, to do something that is more entrepreneurial, there's no reason to not, like, even, I mean, in Kansas City, I have seen so many people that I know start something on the side while they're still working. I mean, you can do it. So the only thing holding you back is yourself. And I think the other thing that's really important is to surround yourself with people who believe in you, and who understand that desire to be a creative entrepreneur, because there are going to be some people who don't. And it's not like you shouldn't associate with them, but maybe don't talk to them about this, because I don't know that, there's this really good quote that it's just sort of like, unless you're in the arena with me, I don't need to listen to your feedback. You know what I mean? So put people in your circle that are going to be in the arena fighting with you, and listen to them. I mean, no one can go do any of this without support and encouragement. Also, find a good therapist. that's key. But yeah, just the whole, it's true. I mean, I tell people, I'm asked a lot to meet with younger people who are wanting to do something like this, or who don't even know what they want to do. And I always say to them what I asked myself before I took the leap into advertising and to something more creative. I basically said, Jessi, if you don't love what you're doing, why are you doing it? Life is short. It's too short to spend time in a career working or doing something that you have absolutely no satisfaction from. So I just would say, follow that itch. Don't stop until you haven't seen it before.
I love it. I love it. That's great advice. Thanks so much for sharing your story. It's awesome. Very encouraging. I wish you the best. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to thank Jessi once again for being my guest here today on The Breakthrough Creative. Thank you for your insight into what it takes to be a professional creative director, as well as what it takes to be an owner and operator of your own mobile floral shop. I had never heard of that kind of business before in my life, and I'm so excited for you. I also know you've had a lot of curveballs thrown your way, but you've just been hitting them out of the park. So I'm looking forward to hearing about your continued success in this new endeavor. For anybody who'd like to reach Jessi, you can find her on Instagram at Pensive Girl or at Always Wander Home. And both of those URLs are linked in the notes below. Now, For anyone who has not yet subscribed to The Breakthrough Creative, if the show has been beneficial to you, please subscribe to us. If you are listening on a podcast, if you would give us a 5-star rating and a review, that would help. And if you could share it with the artists in your life, that would be awesome too. So, on behalf of The Breakthrough Creative, I am your host, John McDavitt, where we talk about the business of art and the art of business. And I hope that you are working to become better and better and better at your craft and figuring out the business side of things so you can make a living doing what it is that you love. Have a great day.